Good morning, everybody. The situation in Ukraine looks like it could be taking a turn towards disaster very, very soon. Both the Russians and the Ukrainians are blaming each other for something that hasn't happened yet. That's not explaining it very well. The Ukrainians are saying, the Zelensky is saying that Russia is about to attack the Zaporozhiye nuclear power station. And Russia is also saying that the Ukrainians are about to attack the Zaporozhiye nuclear power station. Now, who do you believe? Well, it is inconceivable that the Russians would attack and destroy the Zaporozhiye nuclear power station because they have control of it, and it is providing southern Ukraine, or Novorossiya, depending on which side you are, is what you call it. That power station is providing that area with electricity and nuclear power. They've had control of this for over a year. If they wanted to blow it up or destroy it, they would have done it already, but they haven't. They've totally rewired the systems and maintained it and kept it going for over a year, and it's providing cheap, plentiful energy to the Crimea, to Mariupol, to Donetsk, Luhansk, and those regions in southern Ukraine, Novorossiya. What is almost certain is that if this is attacked, it will be by the Zelensky regime backed by NATO, because there are people in NATO countries appallingly, ashamedly, want to escalate this conflict or proxy war as it is now to a nuclear conflagration. And that must not happen because nobody wins in such an event. So the noise is coming from Zelensky in particular. He made a speech yesterday where he's saying that the Russians have mined the roofs or put explosives on the roofs of the 6 reactors there in that power station, and they're going to detonate them. There's absolute nonsense. It's as much a load of complete nonsense as to say that Russia blew up the Nord Stream pipelines, which were their own pipelines that they spent £35 billion on building in order to provide cheap, plentiful gas from Russia to Germany, which would have kept industry going, not just in Germany, but all over the EU, and provided cheap, plentiful energy to warm up people's homes. That was blown up, sabotaged in a terrorist attack, as reported by Seymour Hersh, the award-winning and highly respected investigative journalist, by the United States with the help of Norway. Other people also suggested that the UK, my country, shamedly, was involved in that as well. Now, obviously, I wasn't there, so I don't know, but this is where the finger is pointing at. And all the investigations by NATO countries and Western countries have said, oh, we can't work out who did it. Well, you know, why is that? Because they know exactly who did it. They just know that it wasn't Russia, as they immediately pointed the finger at the time. It was people from NATO countries that did it. NATO is gone wrong. It is rogue. It is not doing anything for the benefit of the world or for the people in the countries that are in NATO anymore. And this is something that started over 10 years ago, 20 years ago. You know, NATO countries ruined Iraq. They ruined Libya. They tried to ruin Syria. They did, you know, a good job of that, but Assad is still there. Now you have people crazily poking the bear, the Russian bear, for nearly 10 years. And then obviously this conflict has started and it's escalated and escalated. And it is NATO leaders and governments that have done that. This conflict could have been easily avoided, a year ago, 8 years ago, 20 years ago, however far you go back. The wrong decisions have been made every single time by NATO leaders. We should be friends with Russia, partners with Russia, not stoking up a war with them. And some of the worst leaders who have done this have been in my country, the UK. There was a peace agreement on the table between Putin and Zelensky in April 2022, just 2 months after this conflict started, the special military operation, as it was then. But Boris Johnson went to speak to Zelensky, and then that deal was scuppered. Now we have more and more heavier and heavier weapons being sent to the Zelensky regime over the last year. HIMARS and then Patriot missiles, defense systems now, UK Storm Shadows. They're talking about sending F-16s later this year. And it's likely that if anything does happen to this Zaporozhiye nuclear power station, it will be done by US HIMARS or UK Storm Shadow missiles, which brings the UK and the US directly into conflict with Russia, because they consider that it is in Zaporozhiye, which is Russian territory, after the 4 referenda in the 4 southern oblasts of Ukraine last year. So this cannot happen if there is anyone who is sane in the government or the governments in the West or in NATO. You need to call this off and stop escalating this conflict, because no one is going to win. This is happening because the long-mooted counter-offensive in the south has just totally fallen flat. The Ukrainian armed forces have been decimated in Bakhmut. They just do not have the men and the artillery necessary, the armoured vehicles, in order to push south from the southern front line of attrition down towards the Sea of Azov, which they want to do. That's their plan. There'll be this massive counter-offensive where the Ukrainian forces will overwhelm the Russian defense lines and push all the way down to Mariupol and Melitopol and Crimea and take that back again. Complete nonsense. That's fantasy. That's not going to happen. They tried it. They're not getting anywhere. They're getting a few kilometers because Russia's setting up fire traps for them to advance, and then they're pummeling the soldiers, poor Ukrainian soldiers that have been ordered to go in to advance. They get destroyed and then they move back, and this is happening over and over again on the front lines. So this is not happening. It's not going anywhere. So the NATO commanders, whoever they are now planning, it seems, to blow up this nuclear power station. So that will give them a justification to send NATO troops en masse into Ukraine, which is what they want to do. You know, they want a justification for doing this so that they can send in, you know, the troops that are ready in Eastern Europe to go in and be activated, and also to maybe use tactical nuclear weapons. What they will do, of course, if they do blow this power station up with Storm Shadow or HIMARS weapons, they're almost hoping that this will then elicit a response from Russia that will use tactical nuclear weapons, so they can then justify using tactical nuclear weapons on Russian major territory, Moscow and places like that. Absolutely complete insanity going on. It seems I'm the only, one of two anyway, political party leaders in the UK that is against this war, this proxy war, this escalation, and is calling out NATO on the insanity of escalating and prolonging this war, which could still end just like that if they wanted to. You know, we've got two presidential candidates now in the USA who are saying we could stop the war just like that. And they would do, because only the US president really has the power to just stop it just like that. You know, I don't. I can just call for it and pray for it at the end, and this doesn't get out of control. But I don't have the actual power. The US president does. And obviously you've got Biden, who is, you know, non-compos mentis. I mean, he's doesn't have much between the ears anymore. But he's just saying what people tell him to say, and the people pulling his strings. Obviously, you've got Blinken and Newland and Franklin behind the scenes. Sorry, not Billy Graham, Lindsey Graham. Billy Graham's totally different. Lindsey Graham, but behind the scenes, who are warmongers who want to escalate this war. But Trump, if he's president again, he will end this immediately. And also RFK, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., if he's president, he will end this immediately. We don't have anybody in any other political party that's viable in the UK that will end this war. If you're in the UK and you're opposed to this, please do support me in the Heritage Party. I'm calling this out, and I get criticism from all quarters. You know, it doesn't matter whether it's the fake Conservatives, Labour, Reform UK, Green, Lib Dem. They're all the same. They all want war. They're all insane. We need to stop this war. Please support me in the Heritage Party to call out this madness in the political sphere in the UK, to try to get more people to oppose this and stop it before it escalates into something that we can't control. Thanks for listening, everybody.